you are a million times more interesting than the actor you want to be. Show them your heart.
Yeah.
You know, that's all you have to show them your heart. There's going to be a part in the scene that will make Doug cry, but not me,
right.
and vice versa. Yeah. And you have to show them your heart. You, as a human being, are more interesting than the idea of something.
What is up? My name is Douglas Nyback. This is the DNA podcast. Today we're talking to Anna Hopkins. Anna Hopkins is an actor who has a laundry list of credits. I worked with her on a series called Defiance for Sci-Fi. She's worked on Children Ruin Everything, Shadowhunters. She's one of the most intelligent women that I know. I've been extremely grateful to call her a friend for years and years and years. And the wisdom that she imparts is nothing short of profound. And you know, she's an up-and-coming director as well, which I think is just so incredible that she's taking that next step. She's an amazingly talented writer. In this podcast, she talks a lot about how she came up, how she started, her first teachers, the journey that she had to becoming an actor after she had gotten rejected from theater school. And this was a very emotionally moving conversation for me. Like, it's always such a beautifully revealing thing when I chat on one of these things with a friend and I learn so much about them that I didn't know. And Anna is a constant source of inspiration to me. The world is lucky to have her, and I was unbelievably lucky to have this conversation with her. So without further ado, I am excited to invite you into this chat, and thank you for being here. Hi.
Hi.
So I just want to thank you for being here, and I also just want to say, like, you know, I've worked with you for a really long time, and yes. You know, I've been lucky enough to work with you as a coach as well as be on set with you, and I'm just like such a huge fan of yours. Aww. as a person and as a performer. I think that you're just like the cat's pajamas, and I'm
putting that on my resume.
You should.
Yeah.
You should. Special
Yeah.
skills. Doug says I'm the cat's pajamas.
Yes.
And so, like, I obviously, like, there's so much we can talk about by way of process. Like, I've known you, we've been working together for probably like 10-ish, maybe over 10 years now.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
This is true.
And I've had so much access to your process over the years, and I've watched you, like, you were confident when you came to me, and now you're at a level where, like, very seldom does a coaching ever take more than like 20 minutes. And your process is so dialed in, and I'm curious, you're working pretty regularly, you've had so much success, and this might seem like a strange beginning at the end type way to approach this conversation, but like, what do you want next? Because I was on my way here trying to figure out, like, what am I going to talk to her about? And I'm like, I have no idea what Anna's goals are. Like, what's next for you? So okay. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you caught me at a really interesting time where I'm really shifting into, I'm going behind the camera so much more.
Cool.
And it just feels so informed by my acting career, and like, it just feels like the natural progression of my interests over the years. And so it's kind of twofold. Like, I've got these two parallel things going on. I've got my acting career, which, you know, after many years, you understand that there's periods of downtime, right? And it's like, what do you do with that? And what do you do with that to create the life that you want, and to be able to use what's inside of you? Because that's all what we're trying to do, right? And
right.
like I think practically I had been sort of developing stuff on the side as I was going through those periods of downtime. And now I'm sort of like really attracted to, you know, I'm writing a lot, I'm making my own films, I'm directing commercials, I'm just like doing a lot of that, and it's an amazing feeling to bring all of my acting to the table, and it's been so valuable. Like, it's an amazing tool to have when you start creating your own stuff.
Right.
So in terms of like, what do I want to do next, or what would be the most ideal thing? I have always been a sort of like very optimistic, hopeful on the horizon, I know there's something, but I've always been more of I'm open and I will see sort of what comes and then I'll walk through those doors, as opposed to this is the thing that I want and I'm going to go get it.
Right.
So sometimes when you say that, it can sound like, oh, you're not like, I don't know, that term of like, you must manifest this one thing.
Right.
I consider myself extremely ambitious and also at the same time like kind of vaguely open to things, if that makes any sense.
It does. It's actually, so I've been having a kind of a bunch of conversations like this, and it's like been relevant to scene work, but also relevant to life. Have you heard of the concept of life surfing?
No, but I already love that.
Yeah. So it's so I brought this up, like I started thinking of scenes this way, that like an actor in the middle of a scene can choose to surf the wave of the scene, and the script is taking, like the scene is always going to shore, the wave is always going to shore, and where actors tend to trip up is they're like, but I prepared this to go left here, and the wave's like, no, we're going right, and so you force it left and you get dragged to shore anyway, just now you're a t-shirt and a washing machine, as opposed to being like, well, the take started, like we're already past the time of we can control this. Now all that's left is ride the wave. And then I thought I was super smart, and then it turns out this is actually a life philosophy created by people who are way smarter than me, of life surfing, of being like, you might not like the wave you're on, or this might not be the wave that you predicted. And you can choose to surf it or you can choose to fight it.
Yeah.
And so to me, it seems like what you were just talking about, like resonates there.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And I also think in a scene that approach is why I love to act. Like, I think when you are able to tap into those instincts and freedom and spontaneity guided by the story and the text, it's like, I've never surfed, but I could imagine it's like that. And so I think that's a really beautiful way of putting it. Like, that's how I feel in my career as well, and sort of in my life. It's, you've got to be, you have to work hard, you have to prepare, you have to do all those things, but you have to really be open to like what is coming, and you can try and engineer it as much as you want, and that work informs what happens, but you have to like really be open and see what's in front of you and walk through the door when it's there. And
See, I find that so fascinating because like I've known you for so long, and I've never known that that's your life philosophy, and I have been historically in my life so bad at that. like I have been like, I will deal with something being wrong for a decade.
Wow.
Before I like, and I will make it work, and then of course it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not that it hasn't led to growth and like its own strange mixture of opportunities, but the opportunities tend to be mired in struggle. And I've been like anytime anybody's like set down a needle filled with struggle, I've been like, pump it in my veins.
We'll take it.
Yeah, and I feel like only recently am I actually in this period of like trying to actually exist in that state of ease.
Yeah.
Like being open to like, I can't control what's coming to me.
No.
I can say yes or no to it, but like trying to force just does not work.
Yeah.
Have you always known that? Is that just like a thing that you carried with you in life? For like, because I feel like that's
your tone
living.
Is just like,
that's like living life with a cheat code on. Like that sounds great. Like you and the Dalai Lama.
I mean, it's not as good as the Dalai Lama, but I have been always like that. Okay. And I think like, I don't know why. I think, both of my parents are very much like that.
Right.
So I think it was just like, that's how you're gonna live your life. They're both artists, they're both painters, both in the world of, as we would call ourselves, freelance workers.
Yeah.
So I think that there's that balance always that I witnessed in them, which was work really hard and surf the wave. You have to, if you want to live a life that is not completely tormented. It's true, like, they had to do that, so I think, it was just part of like the way that I was brought up.
Yeah.
And when I said, oh, I want to be an actress when I was in high school, it was always absolutely, that's great. Finish school at least, like try and do.
What did you go to school for?
I tried to go to theater school, but I didn't get in.
What?
Yeah, I couldn't get into any theater schools.
That's crazy.
So I was like, okay. I had other interests, and so I studied communications and film at Concordia, which I'm so grateful for. That's where I, did a lot of writing and learned to read things in ways that I think really help with scripts and acting and everything like that. But that was one of those things where I was like, all right, well, didn't get into theater school. And, I took a year off and I was a waitress for a year. And that was informed so many things. And I was never like scared something wasn't going to work out. I just thought, okay, I'll just have to wait a little bit longer. And I started taking a ton of acting classes outside of school, and that's where I developed so much with my teacher, who's since passed away, Jacqueline McClintock, who was really formative in my life. So you see all those things, like I could have just, no, I'm going to reapply to theater school and that's it, and I wouldn't have met her.
Right.
And she steered me into a hugely important direction. So I think those.
Do you mind if I ask you to say more about that? Like, what direction was there? Like,
So I had met her. Okay, I was in high school.
Cool. Yeah,
and I started out in dance, and I was always performing.
You were like you're like a not around dancer too. Yeah.
I was. I try to go to class now. I'm like, oh my gosh. But no, I was really, really into dance.
Okay.
And performing was just part of my life. And in high school, in grade 9, I remember they put out a casting notice for Cabaret, which, when I think about like high school kids putting on that show, it's just like the most insane thing. I'm so glad, like Mr. Flowen, drama teacher, bold, incredible.
Yeah.
And I just said, I think I want to audition for that. And I remember buying the sheet music, and I learned the song, and I auditioned for it, and I got the lead role.
Nice.
And to this day, some of those performances were the most enjoyable acting experiences I'd ever had.
Yeah.
So free, like really the first time you discover freedom on stage is like that's the most incredible feeling.
That was me with like community theater as well in Cameras Albert when I was in high school. Yeah, doing Guys and Dolls. We changed all the fat jokes to skinny jokes for Nicely Johnson because I was the only kid in my entire town that could sing an A flat. So it was just like, well, you're it, kid. But the same thing. I was just like, this is the best.
I know. I think about that all the time. Like it's just, and also being exposed to a piece of writing like that, at that age. And it's, so in any case, one of the teachers at our school is Jacob Tierney's mother. Okay. Who is the director, Letterkenny.
Yes.
And she's, at the time, Jacob was an actor, and so was his sister, and she said, you should meet my children's agent.
Great.
So, who is still my agent today.
No kidding.
Yes. So Karen Benzikin, so she's my Montreal agent.
Yeah.
She came to see the play, and she said, look, if you want to start, I think you have something, but you should take some acting classes.
Right.
So she sent me to Jacqueline.
Right.
I was the youngest in the class. She had a meeting with my mother because she was concerned about Meisner technique with a minor.
Oh, so she's Meisner.
She's Meisner, yeah.
That's so ahead of, like, that's great that she checked, because Meisner is wonderful and can also...
In the wrong hands can be very dangerous.
Yeah, there's a dark side to that force.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, yes, she was... Jacqueline trained with Sanford Meisner. She's one of the last sort of people who at the Neighborhood Playhouse was a pupil of his. And so on top of it, as a human being, she was a very zero ego, highly compassionate, empathetic, highly intelligent, and all of those things together made her an incredible conduit for this technique.
Yeah.
So I started training with her, and I worked with her from the age of 17 until 23, probably 2 to 3 times a week.
Wow.
So I went through ultimately she said, you could either go to the neighborhood playhouse for 2 years and do this every day, and it will cost you this amount of money, and we didn't have the money to do that. So I did it with her.
Yeah.
And I essentially learned how to listen. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And that served me, continues to serve me, how to listen and how to answer. And I can't overestimate how important that was for me and how I work. She's given that to many, many actors. And so I came into auditioning and the world of the business of acting with that under my belt. I had a lot of other things to learn, and a lot of them I learned with you, but that was my foundation.
Yeah.
And that's something that I hold very, very close to my heart, and it's very important for me.
It's so cool and unique that you began your process foundationally with listen and respond, because like you and I think are of similar ages, so I would have been like in theater school, like in New York at that time, and I was steeped in a world of there's a right way to do it, there's a wrong way to do it. If you don't do it this way, your GPA drops, you lose your scholarship, your mother will never love you. And people telling me that it's the most important and like serious job in the history of mankind. So I, took that.
That's intense.
I graduated, and they were like, "Congratulations, you're an actor now." And then I'm like doing dinner theater in Springboro, Ohio, doing Love, Sex, and the IRS, wearing a dress in a farcical play about tax fraud for $200 a week, and all of the buffet I could eat. And I'm like, I don't think that they were telling me the truth about how serious this job is.
Yeah.
And but it made me, like, at a time where you were getting steeped in a foundation of listen and respond, I was getting steeped into you have to be able to control this. There's a right and a wrong way to do it, which, listen, like, I'm grateful for everything that I learned in theater school, because I learned a lot of very foundational things, and it took me a really long time to feel safe with entering into a scene and being like, I don't know where this is going to go. And meanwhile, that's the secret sauce that makes an actor great. Is the willingness to do that. To say, like, we don't fucking know. We know it's going to be the script.
Oh, 100%. And I think, look, there's two sides to it always. Having started with my foundation, I had the sort of insecurity of not having the theater school experience and the knowledge of plays that I'm trying to look for, and there's so much that these two approaches offer, obviously, but we're talking about surfing the wave, like, that's what she was teaching. And it's something that is, it's like going to the gym. Like, you cannot do it on the first try. You can do it on the 100th try.
Right.
And then once you start to feel it, you never lose it.
Right.
And it's the emotion is riding the scene, like, and you have to follow your instincts. And, like, I couldn't, it was 2 years in when I really start to understand it and feel it and be able to practice it, and then having to apply that to a scene. So then you enter into scene study with her, and it's a whole other thing. And so that's what I did for years before I came to Toronto. And I just wish she was still here.
I know. Hearing you talk about her, it's like I don't know her, and I'm feeling emotional about it because I actually inherited a couple of her, like a few of the folks that trained with her. I think Carolina did.
Carolina, yep.
Clara. And it's I see how incredible you are all as people, and that makes me very aware of how incredible she must have been.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know her, and I'm tearing up.
I know. I mean, this is gonna get No, she.
That's quite something. You know?
You hear about certain people who are so formative, particularly teachers, and it's like, they're just, I mean, there's hundreds of people who feel exactly like, I'm not saying anything new about her.
Right. Right.
And she was also someone who encouraged people to write as well, and like
right.
a lot of us who do that, it's her, you know, and so yeah, the way she taught that technique was really really beautiful and really rare. And there's a former student of hers, Jessica Greco,
okay.
who she's a fantastic actress,
yeah.
And she recently just started teaching Meisner. And so I spoke with her, and we sort of had the same thought. She just said, you know, I feel like it's our responsibility to pass on what she taught, especially because, you know, it's, as we mentioned, like it's this really kind of, all acting classes can be a dangerous place for people who are still developing themselves. Mm-hmm. And there's a responsibility to pass along a very kind of supportive, safe, and also arduous, like it's a hard technique, and to do it properly. So she just started, I went and I was like, I repeated with everybody for 2 hours straight. I hadn't repeated in like 15 years.
Right.
It was so good. It felt so good.
Yeah.
And after I fell asleep for 2 hours at my house because I was like, oh my gosh, this is so intense. But she's doing such a wonderful job. So, you know, that makes me really happy because she's sort of continuing the legacy a little bit on that. And I always say to students, like, text analysis, on-camera works matched with something like that is so powerful.
Yeah. So yeah, like that idea of, this was actually going to lead into my next question, which was, you know, so you had gone through that training, which is, in my mind, I often think of things from an acting standpoint of like fluid in container.
Yeah.
So much of the artistic side is that fluidity, that like all of that everything that you contain, and your willingness and ability to give and receive. And then there is the structure of the story. There is the structure of what is the scene demanding of you. There's the structure of like what is the on-camera audition, and that is in and of itself an incredibly structured performance medium. And so I'm curious, like what's so wild is that like that's basically when I started working with you, was like you got here.
Yes.
And somehow, you know, I was the guy that you came to be like, well, here's how to audition. Not that you didn't know how to audition. You had done Paul Giamatti movies before you met me. Like you were doing fine. But how did you find the transition into, because in my view, you just picked it up so fast. But I also didn't have access to your private process. Like how was the process of switching almost from that kind of fluid process into product-oriented work? I'm curious.
Right near the end of Jacqueline's life, she gave me a couple of books. One of them was Larry Moss's Intent to Live.
Yeah.
And I think after her teaching, she kind of, not that she forgot, but she wanted to remind the students, like, don't forget the text. And that's not really what we focused on in class ever. Right. A little bit, but it was, you know, another technique. And in this book, she said, make sure you know, the text is God. Everything you've learned here, you have to apply it to that. Because she was, you know, she just really wanted to make sure I understood that, so I didn't go off into, you know, acting world. And I'm like, but I feel like I want to go here with it.
Right.
You know, you have to, as you said, contain it. So I went to New York and I studied with him.
Right.
And he, like, I mean, he's an incredible teacher.
Yeah.
And yeah, he he was that sort of turning point a little bit where I was like, oh, okay, I need to read more. I need to read more plays, I need to read more scripts, and I need to just like really now steep my brain into this.
Right.
And then I moved to Toronto.
Yeah.
I had already done some work. So yes, I had been in Barney's version, and that audition process, I was with Jacqueline, like we worked on that together. I got the role, the experience was incredible. And then I was thrust into the audition world, and I didn't feel like I was firing on all cylinders at all.
Right.
Like I had it, but it wasn't translating necessarily.
Right.
And so it was Clara who was in your class, and we had just moved to Toronto, and she says, you have to meet this guy, Doug. He's really smart. He speaks the same language in a sense of Jacqueline. And that's why I came to see you, because we're always on the lookout, always, still to this day, like, oh, that person's so Jacqueline. Like, we're looking for that type of approach.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of a giant right now. It's quite wild. That's
But that's what that was the conversation, because I was looking for somewhere to work.
Yeah.
And I looked into certain schools and stuff, and I just wasn't sure where to go.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I think when we started working together, you were able to. You showed me that you have to tell the story in the audition. There's a beginning, middle, and end to this piece.
Yes.
And also your place in the entire sort of apparatus.
Yes.
And I remember you had said something to me like, we did this first trial or whatever, I just did a scene.
Yeah. It was
and
like
you
a
said
consult.
something really interesting where you said, it's good, but are the producers going to feel confident in you being the leader of this show?
Right.
And I'd never thought of anything like in that world. And why would I? I just didn't, I was in a school classroom in Montreal looking at, listening and answering.
Yeah.
So you shifted things in a way that just structured what I had.
Right.
And for a long time, I couldn't do it on my own.
Right.
And you always said, well, we're going to do this until you can do it on your own.
Right.
And now, when I want to do a coaching, it's because I want to collaborate with another brain.
Right.
And see and have their eyes and more of a collaboration. Whereas earlier, I didn't know how to do it on my own.
Right.
And so you really taught me that. And so that, now I feel like I have those tools.
I would totally agree. So too would all of your bookings.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's so wild because, when I started working with you, like, if I look back on that, I'm like, I was a kid, and so it's always a little mind blowing to me, hearing that I was able to provide some structure, but it's also just like, it means a tremendous amount to me knowing where you were coming from, and then like the giants that you were working with and had been working with, and then feeling that something I had to offer was of value. I mean, like, that's kind of blowing my mind a little bit.
Well,
here,
but it's true, because you're very, like, I think what you said earlier, where like, and you said it as a negative that, you've been trying to control things or engineer things, whatever, that also, it points to, you're very cerebral. You're very, and that is important too. That's a really important part of this process. And that was actually a part of it that I didn't have.
Right.
So it was, it came very naturally to you probably. And obviously you worked so hard at it, but you were a kid, but that's also who you are. So you structured things, you're, and it's, I think it's just like a very you are part of my tool belt,
Right.
with everybody else.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
And I think you're that for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's what I think you probably have for yourself as well. We all have these things that we grab onto and we keep for our own process.
Yeah.
And they all represent something different.
I think one of the things that you said where it's like, we're going to, like I had said, we're going to work on this together until you can do it on your own. I think like that is something that I have always kind of prided myself on as a coach, that idea of like my goal is always to make you not need me.
Yeah.
And I think, so it means a lot that actually stuck with you and that was something that's, because I think if an acting coach is doing their job right, they are putting themselves into a place where like, okay, so I exist in this actor's tool belt, but they don't need to use me all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And like, I remember early on thinking like, how could I do this on my own? Like, it was so foreign to me. Like, even the breaking down of a scene for an audition was so new to me.
Right.
But I learned.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. And you booked Defiance pretty quick after we started working together.
Yes.
I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
Defiance.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which was that one of your first, like, that wasn't your first series reg, was it?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. That one started as a recurring and then eventually turned into a series regular role. And that was the best. It was so fun. That was a cool project. It was.
Yeah, a lot of running around with ray guns and
yeah,
that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So now that you're sort of, would you say you're transitioning into like could you envision a future where like actor Anna is like retired and all that remains is director writer Anna, or do you feel like this is always going to be like being good at one makes you better at the other?
I would say so. Like I think I've always been somebody that likes variety.
Okay.
Like I've always had a lot of different interests.
Yeah. You friggin' own a restaurant.
I also own a restaurant now.
She's very into pizza. Yeah, this is cool.
So yes, I've always really been interested in a lot of different things. My mom growing up was like, just almost every day, like, Anna, you just have to focus on one thing. Like, you have to focus on one thing. You have to focus on.
Well, and look at her now, Mom.
And I did, but so I think with acting, there's a reality to, like, I went out to LA for a while.
Oh yeah, you did.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I could have stayed there, and I didn't. I chose to come back here for a lot of personal reasons. And I've chosen to build my life here.
I want to know all of those reasons. But I also don't want to pressure you into talking about personal things that you don't want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's not these like crazy big reasons, but I think at the time I wanted to be here. Mm-hmm. And so I've decided to build my life here.
Right.
And, there's a reality to being an actor in Toronto. And it's not the same reality as being an actor in LA. Well, you're not going to be cast as the lead here I mean, sometimes it happens.
Yeah. I mean, it has happened to you. Yes.
It has happened.
But yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
I mean,
do, yeah.
it's...
Very often on shows, like, they'll pass over Canadian actors in favor of American actors because reasons,
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying it like as a bad thing. I'm just saying there's like a reality to, now this is the thing. I haven't been cast as leads a lot, but I do this thing where I sneak in as recurrings. Yeah. Like, and I think a lot of us do that. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's an amazing way to like, a lot of my friends in the States are super jealous of that sort of route that we all sort of get to take here. Yeah. So it's actually there's something about it that I love. Yeah. That, you can be cast in something that's, they think it's going to be a couple of episodes, and you bring your A game and they love you and they're interested in the character and things start to develop. Yeah. I think that's a really unique aspect of being a Toronto actor.
Yeah.
That just doesn't exist.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
But at the same time, you're not constantly screen testing for the leads of, like, that's what happens in LA. And,
Yeah,
you know, that's what I was doing down there. And so, look, I'm also like, I'm almost 40 now. So these are realizations and sort of understandings of where I fit in as an actor in Toronto, and all of these realities that are neither negative nor positive, just sort of realities.
Right.
And because of that, I'm just so energized by being able to have a creative output that is writing and directing now.
Right.
I would never give up acting, because that's just part of who I am, and also totally informs what I do.
Right.
And the amount of time it takes throughout, like, people are like, wow, you were on a TV show. Was that 365 days of the year? I'm like, it was 12 days.
Yeah.
But to them, it's like, wow, you were in the whole season.
Yeah.
There's a lot of time.
Yes.
And we all do different things, right, to build our lives. And so that was a very long-winded answer, but no, I'm not retiring.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, good. Good. Because the idea of, like you were talking about life stages, like once again, just like very, very sort of open to surfing the wave you're on, and seemingly not f***ed up about, you know, the wave changing.
No.
Like, and that could, like, I obviously don't have access to struggle, you know, like, it's not always easy to accept a reality change, you know, when we go through these periods as actors. I'm entering into a period where I'm finally translating like a grown-up, like, because I've always been young, so it's like
it's
there
nice.
are, you know, it's a totally different thing.
Yes.
And that to me is quite a positive.
Yes.
But to like the reason why I was kind of asking about, like, are you going to retire, is like, well, I can't wait for the world to have access to, like, the revelations and understandings that 40-year-old Anna has.
Yeah.
Like, as this grown-ass woman who has lived such a rich life, like.
I was actually saying this to my mom the other day. Like, I'm also excited for getting older as an actor, and you know, leaving behind you know, we all have our things that we were when we were in our 20s and early 30s, and it's exciting to think about what else is out there for you as an actor when you. It's not just the transition from, because I've been playing moms for like 20 years, so I don't know, like, weirdly.
You've always been extremely mature in your energy.
Yes. And that's always been like a weird, when I was younger, it was like, you looked too young and you sound too old. And, I got a role where I was a mom, but I got pregnant at 16, so worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
But it's beyond that. It's not like, oh no, I'm going to be mom characters. It's more like, what interesting human beings are going to be available to you when you become older.
Right.
That's very exciting to me, and I feel like I'm in that transition, not totally there yet, but like it's coming, and so I'm really excited for that.
Yeah. Are there any types of, like, characters and archetypes and or, you know, types of shows that you can see in that world, or, like, and the answer to this can be like, I don't know, or I haven't thought about it. You know, it's one of those things that we've spent a chunk of this podcast with you being like, I literally don't plan my life.
I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. So like that's a perfectly valid thing, but you know, like.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I think when I like shows or films, I get really inspired by the stories. Like, I'm like, whoa, this is incredible writing, or this is incredible character. So it's like more just that. Like, I want to do that.
I get that.
You know, like, really good material. Look, I mean, Mayor of Easttown. If I could play that role one day.
Yeah. But
you know, it's like that kind of just, there's just something, I think also like I played a bunch of roles that were really, really like required a lot of makeup and hair and costumes and beauty and femininity and all of that stuff. And I think like, you know, after a while it feels restrictive, and so you are searching for something that's like just totally not that.
Okay, that's really interesting to me. Has that been something that you've always felt, or is that something that, like i.e. when you were going through that period of your career, was there always an element of like wishing that wasn't a part of it, or were you in that period and like super happy to be there? Like I asked this with genuine curiosity, not because there's a right or wrong answer.
No, I would say I was very happy doing those things. Like I think that there's something extremely fun and creative about playing a character. Like I'm thinking about Lilith from Shadowhunters. Like that was like an insane amount of makeup and hair and costume, and then Bad Blood was really similar, where it was like these just huge sort of physical transformations, and a very big emphasis on beauty. Right. Which at the time it's like, okay, this is the requirement, and therefore I will deliver on this. Mm-hmm. I think just when you do anything afterwards, I mean, no, some people are like, I want to continue that. Mm-hmm. I felt...
There are some people who are like, they will desperately cling to that.
Yes. Yeah. And then like a few years after, or like it was right after Bad Blood, I did this film called Tin Can, which is like this really interesting kind of almost sort of avant-garde sci-fi film where I'm stuck in a container and I can't get out for the entire film. And it was like creatively taking off a corset. Like it was so enjoyable. So no makeup. I grew out my leg hair. We actually like, I tried to grow my armpit hair, but it wasn't long enough. So we would like, our makeup process was like putting on like a beard, because I had been in there for 2 years.
Oh, okay.
And it was really incredible to experience that. Now I could probably go back again to like a Lilith or a, you know, it's more just finding that like being able to kind of do both.
Yeah, I find it's interesting. I was having a consultation with a potential new client the other day, and talking about beauty. Like beauty is, it's something that I deal with a lot with clients, like whether male or female, because at the end of the day, it's a visual medium, right? And we're not in England, so like, you know, because that's just like nothing but teeth and noses. And the reality of it is that the vast majority of network television, et cetera, just like maintains a certain beauty standard, and it is what it is. And in so many ways, it's a superpower having it, and at the same time, it's a solution to problems. And it also creates more problems, you know, and it's like something that is so interesting about the way that you're talking about it, is it seems to me that while it's freeing, like that idea of taking off a corset, like it's freeing to not have to worry about it, there is also something about a corset, and it's like both realities have their strengths and weaknesses.
Absolutely.
And I think so often actors do themselves the disservice of creating an internal war with themselves. People view me this way, and that's wrong. Therefore, I have to represent this, or I don't want to get pigeonholed as this. And I think a lot of actors, I find this a lot of in this consultation, a lot of actors get involved in this. Well, I don't want the industry just to view me in this way before the industry even has a opinion about them, you know, and it's like you're creating problems that don't exist yet.
100%.
And you're labeling a superpower that you have as something that's negative.
Yes.
And it's important to be open to taking off that corset and seeing what happens as well, you know, like.
Yeah.
So it seems as though to me you've been able to kind of like ride a wave there as well, like when it comes to aesthetic and beauty. And I'm finding more and more with guys, this has been traditionally a pressure that's been more put on women.
Yeah.
But now, like, unless you're a 22-year-old on boatloads of tests, you're not going to be a movie star.
What?
Like, you have to be stacked. You have to, like Bruce Willis would not have booked Die Hard anymore, unless he had put on another 40 pounds of muscle.
Yeah.
Like in the modern era, it's a whole different thing. And this is not me comparing the plight of men and women.
No,
but I find it so interesting.
Oh,
So how did you avoid like creating an internal conflict bubble within yourself? I always just assumed it was because you're French. I was just like,
I'm not French.
You're French adjacent.
I mean, I grew up in Montreal.
You spent a bunch of time in Montreal.
I think, look, it's such.
Sorry, that's such a limiting thing for me to say.
But I am French. No, but I think there is something about the culture in. I mean, like I can't even say that because I know Quebecois actors who struggle with all. I think this is a huge struggle for actors, and it's extraordinarily more difficult when you're younger. And how you deal with it when you're younger is extremely important, and it will dictate how nothing more, but it will dictate how much you enjoy your life.
Right.
So it's like you can deal with it in a certain way that will continue to get work.
Yeah.
And you will want to die all the time. Or you can figure it out, still get work, and at least have moments. I'm not going to say it's always fine, but moments where you're okay.
Yeah.
And look, I think that a lot of what I had was parents who were very, you're wonderful no matter what, sort of parents.
Nice.
And so I didn't think about it as much necessarily because I think a lot of the aesthetic thing, it's a way to, it's an easier place to put on your anxieties about everything.
Right.
And whether it's with acting or whatever, it's like it's the visual of something, and therefore if I can just tailor this, I will feel more confident or whatever, and you can find reasons for it. Like, I think this look is more important for network TV or whatever, and I want to fit into this thing, and it takes time, but it's really important to understand that the more comfortable you are as you, the more you will work.
Yeah.
and that's it. So it's very hard to figure that out, and we all continue to struggle with it.
Yeah.
But it inhibits acting when you're worried about what you look like. But the reason why we worry about what we look like is because it matters, and how people look at us matters.
Yeah.
So it's a very hard, like.
I've always found it to be this like fascinating catch-22 in that, like, at the end of the day, we chose the job in front of the camera. So how we look is going to be a part of it. Just like how a house looks when you're taking a picture of it matters.
Yeah.
Right? There's a reason why if you're trying to sell a house, you don't stage it to look like a dumpster fire.
Exactly.
Right? You're like, this should probably look like a good house.
Yeah.
Right? So there is that element of it, and that's unavoidable, and it's just the way it is. You know, I haven't always worked this way as a coach, largely because these were just things that I didn't consider, right? Like, to be perfectly honest, I was young and I was like, this is a part of the industry, so harden the fuck up, which is, like, by the way, not the best way to deal with that. But since then, whenever I talk about aesthetic, I talk about, like, I try to be as clear as I possibly can about, like, one, making sure that the actor is comfortable discussing it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
And two, bringing it up as though it is a tool in your tool belt.
Yeah.
This is something that exists, and it is a solution to some problems, and it is not a solution to all problems, because I think as actors, there is so much that is out of our control.
Yeah.
But one thing that is in our control is our aesthetic. And the means in which we can exercise control over that aesthetic can be damaging and unhealthy,
Yeah.
but we do have fucking control over it.
Yeah.
You know, like I watch a Chris Hemsworth movie and I'm like, okay, cool, like time to drop my macros and rock a calorie deficit for 6 months, and then I do, and like that's not, that may or may not be the right thing, but you know, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, if you can see it as, again, exactly, a tool. I think, look, it's so complicated. It's so complicated because you don't know where you're meeting someone. Like, that's what's so hard. But I would say, at least for the actors that I like to watch or that I'm interested in, if you can think about less about trying to fit in to something and more about highlighting who you are,
right,
and what you look like as you. Look, I know it's a blanket statement, but that's what I am drawn to as an audience member, as a writer, as a director, as an actor. And I think that, like, it's I've been there, like, in your early 20s, you're just trying to fit into something.
You don't know who you are. So, and I think this is actually, it's fascinating hearing you talk about this, because I'm like, well, this is why you were, like, I in just learning a little bit about your life, the cocktail of events that put you, in my view, so far ahead of some of your peers at the time, and not in this industry is a competition, because it's not. Like, you're pretty much only competing against yourself.
Yeah.
But I don't think for a second I was ever unclear as your coach of who you were. Like, that you knew. And then it was just about, like, well, okay, how do you point into the camera in a way that's the most effective to get you booking? And I talk about actors this way. It's like the only thing that you can guarantee that nobody else can bring into an audition, because at an upper echelon level, like, we can both reasonably say that, like, you're certainly in it. I would say that I am in it as well. Like, of the 5% of actors in the country who are at our level, we're all capable of doing it. So the question isn't can you or can you not do it, it's what do you bring to it that nobody else can, and that is only your knowledge of self.
Yeah. And then feeling comfortable with delivering that and not getting it because you didn't fit into the puzzle that they were making, and not allowing those rejections to erode that.
Right.
And that is, like, so it's that constant practice of bringing yourself fully, maybe not getting it, and continuing to do so. And I think, like, it goes back to Jacqueline. Like, she always, because when you do scene work in a class in person, particularly in very famous, like, plays and things that you could have seen, like, it's very, you can quickly realize that we're all trying to act like somebody else. We're all trying to be somebody else.
Yeah, it's like anybody who plays Hamlet is like, well, how many guys have been knighted for doing this? You know, like, that's like a thing, right?
It's like an expedited process when you're, like, doing these scenes. And so it was, like, on repeat with her. Like, you are, and I mean, this is a Sanford Meisner saying, but you are a million times more interesting than the actor you want to be. Over and over and over. And it just, like, and she just pounded that into us. And it was always, show them your heart.
Yeah.
You know, that's all you have to show them your heart. There's going to be a part in the scene that will make Doug cry, but not me.
Right.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
And you have to show them your heart. And that all comes back to the aesthetic conversation and everything. It's all about, you're the only like, you as a human being are more interesting than the idea of something.
Yeah.
And it's a really hard thing to practice. Like, I still, to this day, of course, like, you see a breakdown and you're like, okay, like you're kind of visualizing yourself into something else.
Yeah.
Because you don't feel like you're right or you're good enough or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a constant practice, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and it's willingness to go to step into that internal conflict every day.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about rejection. When you're bringing your full self to it, there is an element of you that is actually being rejected.
Yes.
It's not being rejected because it's bad, but it is being rejected because it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
And I think like one thing that if actors are listening to this, which like theoretically they would be the audience, I also think that it's important. Like I don't think actors talk about courage enough, and not in like everybody get around the table and sing Imagine and cure people of COVID. I'm talking about like the courage it takes to be like, all right, I'm going to bring myself to this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to set myself forward for that kind of rejection. Like the number one fear that people have in the developed world is like not lions and elevators, it's public speaking. Mm-hmm. So putting yourself out there for that, and the courage it takes, I think consciously cultivating courage. Because it's easy to say, well, I have to let myself be present, I have to blah, blah, blah. And I've never known how to do that, but I have known how to say, hey, this scares the shit out of me and I'm gonna do it anyway.
Yeah.
Like, and without trying to inflate ego, saying like, this is a courageous job and in any day I can choose courage.
Yeah.
I think is super important. And I've watched you choose courage lots and lots and lots in the time that I've known you, which is really beautiful. Like we've worked on stuff that has touched very closely to personal things. We've worked on, there's always a tremendous willingness, and it's quite something. And I think the more actors can get away from the predictive nature of like, I think this is the way it's supposed to go, or like even no matter how good you are, there's still such a limited number of things that you're capable of predicting in a moment. And what's out there is infinite. Yeah. Going back to that concept of like, show them your heart, you will always be more interesting than, that to me is such a, it's funny because I say these things in coachings and I'm like, oh wow, that was a really good idea, Doug. And then I have a conversation like this, and I'm like, 50 people have had this idea before me. Like it's just like, it's wild. The same thing happens in therapy. I'm like, I thought I came to that.
Well, I think there's an element to once you get to the heart of something, whether it be acting, writing, directing, there is like a set of kind of truths. Yeah. And they're all described different ways by different people. Yeah. But when we all like get to it, it's kind of the same, like we're all realizing the same thing.
You're finding something pretty universal about the human experience, which usually means that you're onto something that audiences are going to relate to as well, which is pretty beautiful. Because at the end of the day, our job is to serve the audience. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of having to bring this thing into land, I tend to end these things with asking the question, if you could go back and give like just starting out Anna, like whether that's just starting out in Montreal or just starting out in Toronto, a piece of advice, what would it be?
I don't know. I mean, I think that this is like, I'm not playing devil's advocate, but I don't think I would say anything because
that's great.
I have to go through all of those things.
Yeah.
And I think that's just, you have to go. I don't want to hold her hand.
I freaking love that. And every time I talk to you, I feel grateful to be a part of your life. Like the fact that you like consider me a part of your tool belt. Like I don't know that you'll ever know. I think you would have to objectively understand the quality of yourself as a human being to know how much that could possibly mean to me, but it means a lot. It means the world.
Well, I mean it.
Yeah, I believe that. I appreciate it very much, and I appreciate you taking the time to come in and talk this thing's like in its infancy, and to have you come on, it means the world, and to learn a lot of these things about you. I feel so grateful to be a part of your process.
Well, I am so happy to be here. It's nice to talk. I never talk about it, so.
Yeah.
It's kind of like going to therapy.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah. And wherever you are, Jacqueline, thanks so much for what you did with Anna and all these wonderful people.
Yes, Jacqueline.
Cool. Appreciate you, lady.
That was so fun.
Yeah.